The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Ouagadougou as Captain Ibrahim Traoré reviewed the intelligence reports spread across his makeshift desk. The abandoned warehouse that served as his operational headquarters buzzed with quiet activity. Radio operators monitored frequencies, analysts pored over satellite imagery, and his most trusted lieutenants planned the day's security operations. Traoré had been leading Burkina Faso for 8 months now, ever since the September coup that brought him to power. The young captain had promised change, stability, and an end to the jihadist insurgency that plagued the Sahel region. But power, he was learning, came with invisible enemies lurking in every shadow. The first sign of trouble arrived at exactly 9:15 that morning. Lieutenant Colonel Amadou Sankara burst through the warehouse doors, his face pale with urgency. Sankara had been Traoré's childhood friend, a man he trusted with his life. The expression on his face now made Traoré's blood run cold. "Captain, we have a problem," Sankara said, his voice barely above a whisper. "A big problem." Traoré looked up from his papers, immediately sensing the gravity in his friend's tone. The warehouse fell silent as all eyes turned toward their leader. The weight of command had aged Traoré beyond his 34 years, but his eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had carried him through the ranks. "What is it?" Traoré asked, setting down his pen. Sankara glanced around at the other officers in the room, then leaned closer. "Our contacts in the Defense Ministry intercepted a communication. There's a drone strike planned for today. The target coordinates match this location exactly." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Traoré felt his chest tighten, but years of military training kept his expression neutral. A drone strike meant foreign involvement. It meant someone with serious resources wanted him eliminated. "How reliable is this information?" Traoré asked, his voice steady despite the storm brewing in his mind. "Very reliable," Sankara replied. "The source is someone who's never been wrong before. The strike is scheduled for 1100 hours. That gives us less than 2 hours." Traoré stood slowly, his mind racing through possibilities. Who would order such an attack? The French, still bitter about his decision to expel their forces. The Americans, concerned about his growing ties with Russia. Or perhaps one of the regional powers threatened by his rise. But that was only the beginning of the nightmare that would unfold. Major Fatou Diabaté, his intelligence chief, approached with a secure satellite phone in her hand. Her expression was grave as she extended the device toward Traoré. "Captain, you need to hear this," she said. Traoré took the phone and listened as a distorted voice delivered a chilling message. The caller claimed to represent a coalition of international actors who considered his leadership a threat to regional stability. They offered him a choice: resign immediately and go into exile, or face the consequences of defying the established order. "You have until 10:30 to make your decision," the voice said before the line went dead. Traoré handed the phone back to Diabaté, his jaw clenched with determination. Around him, his officers waited for orders, their loyalty absolute despite the mortal danger they all faced. "Evacuate the warehouse," he commanded. "But we don't run. We relocate to the secondary site and prepare for war." The next 30 minutes were a blur of controlled chaos. Equipment was packed, documents were secured, and personnel were moved to vehicles with military precision. Traoré's convoy consisted of 6 armored vehicles, each carrying his most trusted fighters. They had trained for this scenario, but none of them had imagined it would come so soon. As they sped through the streets of Ouagadougou, Traoré's mind worked through the implications of what was happening. A drone strike required significant intelligence, surveillance, and coordination. Someone had been watching him for weeks, maybe months. Someone knew his routines, his locations, his security protocols. The convoy reached the secondary safe house, a fortified compound on the outskirts of the city, just as the clock struck 10:45. From the rooftop, they could see smoke rising from the direction of the warehouse. The drone strike had proceeded as planned, obliterating the building where Traoré should have been. But no one expected what came next. Major Jabate's radio crackled to life with urgent reports from across the city. Military checkpoints were being attacked simultaneously. Government buildings were under siege. The airport had been seized by unknown forces. This wasn't just an assassination attempt, it was a full-scale coup. "Captain," Sankara said, his voice tight with tension, "we're receiving reports of foreign mercenaries in the city. Well armed, well coordinated. Someone planned this operation for months." Traoré grabbed his binoculars and scanned the horizon. In the distance, he could see military vehicles that didn't belong to his forces moving through the streets. The attackers wore no identifying insignia, but their equipment and tactics screamed professional military operation. The secure radio in the safe house came alive with a transmission that made everyone freeze. It was General Paul Ouattara, Traoré's former mentor and the man he had overthrown in his own rise to power. Ouattara's voice carried across the airwaves with cold authority. "Ibrahim, my boy," the general's voice said, "you always were too ambitious for your own good. Did you really think you could change the game without consequences?" Traoré picked up the radio transmitter, his finger hovering over the response button. The old general had been living in exile in Côte d'Ivoire since the coup. His involvement explained the sophisticated nature of the operation. "General," Traoré responded, "I thought you were enjoying retirement." Ouattara's laugh was harsh and humorless. "Retirement is for old men who accept defeat. I am neither old nor defeated. You took something that wasn't yours to take, and now the bill has come due." Through the compound's reinforced windows, Traoré could see armed figures moving through the surrounding neighborhood. They were being systematically surrounded, cut off from potential escape routes and reinforcements. "Your foreign friends won't help you forever," Traoré said into the radio. "The people of Burkina Faso will never accept a puppet government. The people of Burkina Faso will accept whoever keeps them safe and fed," Ouattara replied. "And that won't be a reckless young captain who picked fights with powers beyond his understanding." The transmission ended, leaving the safe house in heavy silence. Traoré looked around at his remaining followers, barely 20 men and women who had chosen to stand with him against impossible odds. These were soldiers who had believed in his vision of an independent, sovereign Burkina Faso free from foreign interference. Lieutenant Colonel Sankara approached with a detailed map of the city. "Captain, we have 3 possible exit routes. But they're all heavily monitored. If we move now, we might be able to reach the military base at Kaya." Traoré studied the map, but his strategic mind was already working on a different level. Running would only delay the inevitable. His enemies had superior resources, international backing, and months of preparation. A conventional escape would end in capture or death within hours. "No," he said finally. "We don't run." His officers looked at him with surprise and concern. Major Jabate stepped forward, her voice urgent. "Captain, with respect, staying here is suicide. They have us outnumbered 10 to 1, and more forces are arriving every hour. Traoré moved to the radio equipment and began adjusting frequencies. His fingers worked with practiced precision as he searched for the emergency broadcast channel used by loyalist forces throughout the country. "Sometimes," he said without looking up from the controls, "the only way to win is to change the rules of the game entirely." The radio crackled to life, and Traoré's voice began transmitting across Burkina Faso. But this wasn't a military communication, it was a direct appeal to the people. "Citizens of Burkina Faso," his voice carried across the airwaves, "this is Captain Ibrahim Traoré. At this moment, foreign mercenaries and their local collaborators are attempting to overthrow your government. They come with weapons bought by foreign powers who want to control our resources and dictate our future." In homes, shops, and gathering places across the country, people stopped what they were doing to listen. Traoré's words were being broadcast on every available frequency, cutting through regular programming with urgent clarity. "I speak to you not as your leader, but as your brother," he continued. "We face a choice that will define our nation for generations. We can surrender our sovereignty to those who view us as nothing more than a source of gold and uranium, or we can stand together and fight for our right to determine our own destiny." Through the compound's security cameras, Traoré could see the mercenaries pause in their advance. They were receiving new orders, likely from commanders who understood that killing him during a live broadcast would create a martyr and potentially spark a nationwide uprising. But that was exactly what Traoré was counting on. The response came faster than anyone expected. Within minutes, the radio was alive with reports from across the country. Citizens were pouring into the streets of major cities. Workers were leaving their jobs to join demonstrations. Most importantly, military units that had remained neutral were declaring their loyalty to Traoré's government. Colonel Mamadou Barrow, commander of the strategic military base at Koudougou, came on the radio with a message that changed everything. "Captain Traoré," his voice boomed across the frequency, "the 2nd Armored Regiment stands with the legitimate government of Burkina Faso. We are mobilizing now to restore order in the capital." Similar declarations followed from military commanders across the country. The coup that was supposed to eliminate Traoré in a matter of hours was turning into a popular uprising against foreign interference. General Ouattara's voice returned to the radio, but this time his tone carried an edge of desperation. "Ibrahim, you're making a mistake that will cost thousands of lives. Order your supporters to stand down, and I guarantee your safe passage out of the country." Traoré looked around at his officers, seeing the hope returning to their faces. The tide was turning, but the most dangerous phase was just beginning. "General," Traoré responded, "the only mistake was believing that the people of Burkina Faso would accept foreign domination without a fight." Outside the compound, the mercenaries were receiving urgent communications. Their tactical advantage was evaporating as loyal military units converged on the capital. What had been planned as a quick surgical operation was becoming a prolonged conflict they couldn't win. Major Djabate, monitoring intelligence communications, suddenly grabbed Traoré's arm. "Captain, we're intercepting communications between the mercenary commanders and their foreign handlers. They're discussing immediate extraction. The operation is being aborted." Through his binoculars, Traoré watched as the foreign fighters began withdrawing from their positions around the compound. Their vehicles moved with the disciplined haste of professionals cutting their losses. But the day was far from over. At 1400 hours, Colonel Barrow's armored column reached the outskirts of Ouagadougou. The sight of government tanks rolling through the streets sent a clear message to any remaining coup supporters. The legitimate government was back in control. Traoré and his officers left the safe house for the first time in hours, escorted by loyal troops who had fought their way through the city to reach them. The streets were filled with celebrating citizens, many carrying improvised banners supporting their young leader. As evening fell, Traoré stood on the steps of the presidential palace, addressing a crowd of thousands who had gathered to show their support. The failed coup had not weakened his government, it had strengthened it by revealing the depth of popular backing he commanded. Today, he told the crowd, we faced a test of our resolve. Foreign powers and their local allies tried to impose their will on our sovereign nation. But they discovered something they had not expected, the unbreakable spirit of the Burkinabe people. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Traoré knew this victory was only temporary. The forces that had orchestrated today's attack would regroup and try again. The price of independence was eternal vigilance. In the days that followed, investigations revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. Intelligence documents recovered from abandoned mercenary positions showed detailed planning that had taken months to develop. Bank records traced funding through multiple shell companies to foreign intelligence services. Communications intercepts revealed coordination between exiled political figures and international actors opposed to Traoré's policies. General Ouattara, facing charges of treason and foreign collaboration, had fled the country within hours of the operation's failure. Several high-ranking military officers who had participated in the plot were arrested and faced court-martial. But the most significant discovery came from analyzing the drone that had been used in the failed assassination attempt. Technical examination revealed sophisticated guidance systems and encrypted communication equipment that could only have been provided by a major military power. 3 weeks after the failed coup, Traoré received an encrypted message from an unexpected source. The communication came through diplomatic channels, bearing the seal of a major Western intelligence agency. The message was brief but clear: the next operation will be more successful. Consider our previous offer. Traoré showed the message to his inner circle during a security briefing in the presidential palace. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The drone strike had not been the end game, it had been a warning shot. "They're telling us this was just the opening move," Major Jabate observed. "They want us to know they have the capability to try again, and next time they'll be better prepared." Lieutenant Colonel Sankara studied the message with military precision. The timing of this communication is significant. It comes exactly 3 weeks after the failed operation, enough time for them to conduct a full assessment and plan their next approach. Traoré walked to the window overlooking the capital city. Below, life had returned to normal. Markets were busy, children played in the streets, and people went about their daily lives. But he knew that somewhere, in air-conditioned offices thousands of miles away, analysts were studying maps of Burkina Faso and planning his elimination. The young captain had risen to power, promising to end foreign interference in his country's affairs. That promise had made him powerful enemies who possessed resources he could barely imagine. The failed drone strike had been just the beginning of a shadow war that would test every aspect of his leadership. "Double the security details," he ordered. "Change all operational procedures and safe house locations. And increase intelligence cooperation with our allies in Mali and Niger. If they want to play this game, we'll make sure we know their moves before they make them." As night fell over Ouagadougou, Traoré remained at his desk, reviewing intelligence reports and strategic assessments. The failed assassination attempt had taught him valuable lessons about the nature of his enemies and the resources they commanded. But it had also revealed something else: the unwavering support of his people and the growing strength of the alliance between Sahel nations resisting foreign domination. The drone meant for Traoré had missed its target by mere minutes. But in failing to eliminate him, his enemies had accomplished something they never intended. They had transformed a regional leader into a symbol of resistance that would inspire movements across Africa. The war for Burkina Faso's independence was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. And Captain Ibrahim Traoré had learned that in this conflict, the deadliest weapons were not always the most obvious ones. The failed drone strike had been designed to end his story. Instead, it had become the opening chapter of a much larger narrative, one that would determine the future of an entire continent. 6 months later, as Traoré addressed the United Nations General Assembly, he would reflect on that morning when death had come hunting him from the sky. The assassination attempt had been meant to silence him forever. Instead, it had given him a voice that would echo across the world. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe to FictionWire Africa. This is a fictional story created purely for entertainment.